Hi guys, it's Kelly here, and I am back with another video. Today we are going to be using Fairy Friends from Lawn Fawn. I first saw these at CHA back in January, completely fell in love, had an opportunity to win some at a white elephant game on one of my craft retreats. They did not end up coming home with me, and then the wonderful Shari Moss and Kelly Marie from Lawn Fawn sent them to me because they're wonderful, and then I couldn't wait to use them. So here I'm using my Mini Misty and some intense black ink from Simon Says Stamp because I'm going to watercolor and I'm going to Copic, and you can use Copic color. I'm going to Copic. What? Anyway, you can use this ink for both of them. So it's kind of like the cat's meow. Here I laid out all my stamps so I can stamp them all at the same time. I am using Canson watercolor paper, so I am going to end up stamping them twice because A, I'm stamping multiple images, and B, I'm stamping on watercolor paper. But that's why I use the Mini Misty, so I can just stamp them as many times as I need to, and it's easy. So here I'm using some liquid Frisket from Grumbacher. This is going to protect those images while I watercolor my background. And I just have one paintbrush that's completely devoted to using this because it does stay a little sticky even though you take all of it, rinse it out really good and everything. It does sometimes leave a little bit of residue behind. So I just have one that's like devoted to it. It's an old crappy paintbrush and I'm cool with that. So once I get all of my little areas covered, wait for that to dry. You have to wait for it to dry. And then I'm going to use my Zig clean color markers to just scribble paper directly onto scribble paper. Why can't I talk? Does anybody know? Like, what is the answer to scribble paper? To scribble color on the paper? Like, that's good. Anyway, you can see me continually moving my paper because that liquid biscuit is almost like a latex. So every time the marker catches it, it moves the paper, and it took me like 4 colors to be like, genius, start in the middle. Anyway, so I'm doing a rainbow. And then once I got all of those rainbow colors down, I went ahead and filled in the blue on either side. Here I'm using a flat brush, and I'm trying to figure out the way that I'm going to do it so that I don't have like a mess on my hands. So I decided to start by wetting the blue portions of it and then going in and doing one swipe through each color until I got to the pink, and then I tried to do some blending a little bit. But I'm just basically one swipe, rinsing out the brush, moving on to the next one. These Zig color markers are super pigmented, which I love, but it does leave a lot of color on your brush. So if I swiped once and then tried to go back, it just makes them so muddy. Like it just makes them such a muddy color. So make sure you're rinsing in between so you keep the true pigment. The pink started really running down into that blue, so I decided I was going to kind of blot it up with some paper towel and then go back in and just with regular water and blend out what I needed to blend out. I put that green marker there so I knew where my sky would stop, but also so it would have a good blend between that blue and green. Here the pink again started running down into my green, but I'm not concerned about it as long as I have a good blend for where my grass is going to start. I'm going to do that with my Copics anyhow. So here I decided I was going to go ahead and heat set it. You can just set this aside to dry, but I have no patience, like less than 0 patience. So I heat set mine, and it is a little warped, but it's cool. We're just working with it. Here I'm using some watered down white acrylic paint and a fluffier brush to just kind of put in some clouds. And you can't really see, it's very hard to see it on camera. When it dries, it's kind of like milky. God, that's such a disgusting word. I don't know another word. Translucent? It's translucent. Oh, that's way better than the other one. Ugh. And then once I had that first translucent ones put down to make my clouds, then I added a little bit more white paint. I didn't add as much water so that the white would be a little bit more solid. Just a little something to add to the background. Once those were dry, again, wait till it's completely dry before you try to do the next step, which is remove it. I just do it with my finger. You can do it with a rubber cement pickup. The white acrylic areas will be a little harder to pick up, but once you get it started, it comes off just as easy as the rest. So it's just a little more difficult getting it started, and I think it's probably because that paint is help holding that latex together, so it's just a little more difficult to get it separated. Here I'm putting in the grass. I love a scene. I especially love to build scenes with Lawn Fawn because their images are just so dang cute. I mean, they are just the cutest things ever, and they make it super easy to build a scene because a lot of them have all of the pieces, parts right there in it. I mean, from the background or from the little house to the fairies to the sentiment, like everything was in one stamp set. Literally, I used one stamp set, which I love. I love that you can do all of these things with just this one stamp set. So awesome. So putting in my grass, I am using short flicking motions to build up those blades of grass. The only thing with this is you want to be a little bit careful that you don't go in a straight line. It should be random. If you go straight across in a straight line, it's going to be really obvious. Grass is organic. It doesn't grow in straight lines, so you don't want yours to look that way either. So get in the habit of moving to different areas. You could tell in the beginning I was kind of getting that straight line-ish, so I just moved to the next area to make sure that I kept it flowing so it looked natural. Anything that's darker is naturally going to fall into the background, so in order to make sure that this doesn't look flat, I am making sure to keep some dark in the back and the lighter grass in the front. I didn't feel like, originally I had picked my darkest color as that YG17. I didn't feel like it was dark enough, so I went back and grabbed a G28, and I'm really only adding that to the far back grass. So that way there is just a little bit more depth. I didn't feel like I had enough depth. And then I'm just going to I work out to my darkest and then from my darkest back into my lightest, and I'm doing the same thing. You might ask yourself, why would I feel the need to go back over the darker colors with the YG03 or the YG01? Because Copics will lift each other. So if you put a lighter color over a darker, it will lift some of the pigment. So it just helps everything to blend together, create other hues of those colors that you didn't put down. And it's an overall nicer look, I find. You certainly don't have to do that, to each their own. Here I am doing the two of the same greens, but then or yellow greens, but then I brought in some other greens. You don't have to stay within your color families, especially not with the YGs and the Gs. Everybody can make friends. There's pretty much always a way to blend to make them work together. The way that I was coloring the roof of this, now mind you, you can color it like a flower. So if you look at that, you can see the three that come down. They don't have to be leaves. They can be petals. You could, color them all different colors. I chose to color them as all just like leaves because I felt like there was so much color in here. I didn't want it to be any more, I didn't want to risk making it confusing. So, excuse me. I went ahead and did a green. I did the centers and where they meet darker because there would be natural shadows where anything joins. And then I wanted the highlights to be on the outside as if the petals, the leaves were almost flipping up. We're going to move on to the actual body of the house, which I chose to do in brown because I knew I wanted the stones to be gray and I didn't want everything to be gray. I just thought that the brown would work nicely. This combination of browns, the 50s, happen to be my favorite. They are on the warmer side. But here I basically just kept the center of the house lighter and added my shading around where the roof sits on top. That would naturally be darker. Where it's closer to the grass, that would naturally be darker. And then under the windowsill, dependent upon, I guess, how your window looks, usually they're set back. So there's a little bit of a shadow there that would be created. So again, doing the same thing from lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. I really wish I could break this terrible habit of saying so, but I can't. And I almost just did it again. Did you hear that? I stuttered on it. I stuttered on my next. So, God, I don't know how you guys listen to me sometimes. Anyway, so no little cabin would be complete without a red door. I just think that's an iconic look. The way that I shaded this was I always picture my light source coming from the top right. So if my light was coming in from the top right, the left-hand side of the door would be lighter than the right-hand side of the door. And since I want it to look like it is sitting back in the house, almost in like a little alcove, I'm going to shade the right side of the door darker than the left. You don't have to do that. You can color it however you want to. Any of these you can completely leave off a light source. It doesn't have to be something that you even take into account. And you're going to see here, once I get to that fairy on the right, I totally jacked that up. I wasn't thinking about my light source. I added shading in the wrong spot, and I didn't even try to fix it because I figured there was so much going on in this card. Nobody was going to look at it and be like, oh my God, she did not shade that correctly. Also, if you were born before the 90s, that probably made you think of Sir Mix-a-Lot, Baby Got Back. Anybody? Did you finish the sentence that way? No? Oh my God, Becky, look at her butt. She looks like one of those rap guys' girlfriends. Okay, if you don't know what that song is, go look it up because it's like classic. You should know that. Anywho, we're moving on to the hair. I'm using those same browns that I did before for this particular one. I did one brunette, one blonde, and one black for their hair because I didn't want them to be the same. I thought it would be fun to kind of mix it up. And again, these are my favorite browns, so this is what I go to. It's a little bit of a warmer tone. I do own some of the ashier ones. I just don't have a tendency to use them as often, probably because I like brighter colors, and I think the ashy ones look a little weird with the brighter colors. I don't know, maybe that's just a personal preference thing. We're doing this hair the same way I always do, short flicking motions, leaving a highlight in the center, especially because their hair is up. So that band would be around the shape of their head where the highlight would be, and then also on the top of her bun, there would be a highlight. So for the blonde fairy, which is, I'm trying to figure out which one's going to be blonde here. I like, this is, I guess, my preferred for blondes. The E's 50s, but then I bring in a Y21, and this is just to kind of like brighten up that color. If you don't like a more gold blonde, you don't have to bring in that Y21. You could probably do the E's, the lighter end of the E's, and still be fine for blonde hair. You just want to make sure with that E55, which is the darkest color, you're really light-handed. You don't need a ton of it. It's only to add depth. It's not to be a main color. I just like the way that Y21 kind of just brightens it up, and then the E50 blends everything back out. Here, you're going to see me coloring her hair blue. Don't panic. I have no intention for her hair to be blue. But if I just went in with the grays, she's going to look like Grandma Fairy. Like a little old lady, Grandma Kapuska Fairy. It needs to have some sort of base. Something, a blue, a purple is pretty. But something that the black can sit on so it doesn't look like gray hair. Because we're creating black with the grays that we have. But it's still, I prefer if there's some sort of base so that it doesn't look like grandma hair, like I just said. I don't know, I don't need to repeat that. It's self-explanatory. So here we're going to go back and do all of their skin tones. I'm only going to show you one of them because it's all the same thing. So I'll show you the first one. Underneath her, where her hair hangs over, it will be darker. Her little arms and legs are super teeny tiny. So you don't necessarily have to do. There's another word in there to complete that sentence, Kelly. You don't necessarily have to do all of the shading, all of the colors. I chose to, but if you're just beginning or you have trouble having a light hand, I would just start with the darkest color and then do maybe one mid-tone and then the lightest color. And that's just to keep it from bleeding out into any of your other areas on your image. It took me a long time to be able to be light-handed enough that those smaller areas weren't a problem for me. I used an R20 just to add 2 dots of blush on each of their cheeks, and then I'm going to start coloring their dresses. This is the one where I'm like, light source? What light source? I opted to do hers blue. I just thought that would be, I don't know, I like blue. Blue is my favorite color, guys. So it pretty much makes it into all of mine. So here you can see, if the light source was coming from the top right, the shading would not be on the right hand side. The shading would be on the left. It would be the furthest point away from the light source. And now I'm just like, meh, whatever. Nobody's gonna, I don't care. I'm past the point of caring. I'm just gonna add shading on both sides of the dresses, leave the center part the lightest, and move on with the rest of this card, because the reality of the situation is, doesn't matter all that much. Here I picked a light BG to feather in for the wings. I used the same color on all of the wings, so whatever their color of their dress was, I used on the closest part of the body for the wings, and then on the edges I used that BG11. I just happen to like that blue-green for anything like wings or anything that would be sheer or transparent. I like that BG, and I don't even think I showed it because I don't know where it went, but I used it for the window too on the little house. So for this one, I did color the dress correctly. If the light source was in the top right, then her shading would be on the left. So that one was done right, and then so is the purple one. That blue one got away from me, and like I said, I don't think it makes a huge deal on the card. I don't think anybody would even notice if we weren't doing a video on it and I didn't point it out. So don't sweat that stuff. Not that important. Here we're doing hers violet, and again, I just really like the brighter violet colors. I've just drawn to them so much. I used the VO1, which isn't as light as some of the other ones, but it is, I feel like the violets are kind of difficult sometimes for the coloring, like the actual pigmentation of the markers, because the V000 looks pretty pink. So usually the VO1 or even a V12 I'll go with as my lightest color, but you just use whatever you have. There's not, I mean, it's going to be fine. So I'm blending out with the lightest color again, and then I'm going to go back in with the BG11 for those wings. I really liked the way it blended into the violet, and I liked the way that it blended into the pink. The blue, you almost can't even tell that they're two different colors, but whatevs. In the same set, there's like these little magic stars, little fairy dust, I don't know what you would call them, that makes you know that they're shiny. That's basically what it's telling you. They're shiny. And there's a cluster of them that are 3 and then one single one. I used both on here just to kind of add some accents. It's almost like if you were adding sequins or rhinestones. Does anybody even put rhinestones on their cards anymore? I don't know. I feel like that's gone to the wayside. I really liked it when we were doing it. But anyway, so I added those to just kind of highlight each fairy, and then I brought in my white gel pen to draw patterns on their dresses. And I added dots to their wings and dots to the roof of the house, as well as colored in those little magic fairy sparkles. So I did horizontal stripes on the pink one, vertical stripes on the purple one, and polka dots on the little blue one. You can draw whatever you want. There is no hard and fast rule. I usually try to keep to simpler designs just because I usually have a lot going on when I do a scene. I don't really want to take away from the rest of it. It's supposed to enhance the design. It's not supposed to be the focal point. So these are souffle pens. If you haven't seen them before, they're called embossing pens, and the ink pools and then dries opaque. So these are really fantastic for like adding flowers to a field you've already colored. And where would fairies live if they didn't live in a field of flowers? I mean, let's just use our heads here, people. That just makes good sense. I outline all of my images. You don't have to do that, but I will forewarn you that if you use the acrylic paint, it will dull your black stamping. So you might have to go over at least those areas. I outline everything because I have a real love affair with a bold black outline. But you do whatever you need to do. I added some clear Wink of Stella because fairy wings cannot be anything but shimmery. It's in the rule book somewhere. And now here I am using that sentiment. It is a long sentiment, but I wanted to stack it to kind of fill up that space. So I used a Post-it note to mask the part that I didn't want to stamp. I went ahead and cleaned the stamp after I stamped it. And then I'm going to use a scrap piece of paper to make sure that it's all clean and good and it's not going to stamp any leftover ink or residue or anything like that on the rest of my card. reposition it for the second time, and then I'll use the Post-it note to mask the first portion, that magical day. So everything is kind of stacked. You can cut your stamps. I prefer not to. It's not a big deal if you do. You can put them back together. I just always feel like I'm going to lose the little pieces parts. So this is, what is this? Craft foam, fun foam. My panel was still a little warped, so propping it up on some fun foam can help its stability, help it to kind of flatten out. And then I'm just kind of bending it around there before I add it to my card base, which is just, you know, a simple white border. I didn't really feel like it needed too much else. It's a fairly busy card in and of itself. But that is the whole card. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you guys learned something. I will catch you on the next video. Bye.